Yes,
Okay,
I'm there, Jamie. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So look, I want to just at 5:02, so we'll start. I want to welcome everybody. You all received the agenda, I believe, and there's we've got opening comments, discussion items, and some things to work through. But what I'd like to really do is start with welcoming everyone to this meeting on behalf of the Village of Belcarra Council and the community as a whole. Thank you for all your work that you have done on this water committee and the tremendous skills you've brought to it, your knowledge and your commitment. We really appreciate it. I'd want to, in particular, thank Ian for your work as chair of the committee and recognize the work done by Doug, by Jim, and by Martin. And you folks, I understood, were a committee of 5 at one point, and you've become a committee of 4. So I really want to acknowledge the work that you've done on that. We've come tonight, council and myself have made a commitment to come forward and to have an open discussion and make sure we can have a frank discussion. And we have confidence that we can do that and still be in a good place with everyone. We want to, we indicated that we would come with some answers to some questions. We believe that it's important to show some good faith. It's also important to highlight that, as I've said in public before, we're not looking back in terms of the questions and all the timelines. What we want to do is look forward and get those questions answered. And there may be some we will give you a very few we will give you answers tonight. Some we will give you answers as we work through, and there may be some that come under a 3rd or 4th category that we are not able to give an answer for some reason, and we will be very open and descriptive why we can't do that. And that's not our intent to fill up that one place with a lot of ones, but there could be things that we can't answer. We want to make sure in terms of today that when we leave here, we understand you've provided us with a document with questions, and we want to make sure that when we leave today, we have the totality of any questions. So if there's ones that you've missed and you want to give to us tonight, that's fine. When we go away, we want to have the number that we need to be responsible for answering. And then I guess I would say that we are looking, I know there's been a discussion before about having a workshop meeting about, or what I call, and they're pretty similar, a shaping meeting where we would work with you folks to figure out how we move forward. If there are some issues that are higher priority that you can provide information or recommendations to Bruce and I and the group in front of you, we're certainly committed, because at some point we need to take it to council, and we need to, in open meetings, decide where we're going on this. And I know I speak for myself, Bruce, and staff, that we very much believe that your knowledge, your ability, and your skills and your experience with this will help very much for us to move forward on this. And I'm cognizant that for whatever reason, there seems to be a bit of a logjam with answers, and we're going to try and move forward on that. Okay. So Ian, you as the chair, we've got Bruce is going to make some few brief comments, and then we'll go to you, and then we can kind of move in and go from there. And if you want to give us any guidance or thoughts, or anybody else, we're certainly open to that. But Ian, again, thank you for your work, and thank you for your work as chair. Okay, so Bruce, is it all right if we go, if we all right if we go to Bruce now with folks?
That's great. Thank you, Jamie. Just want to say, as all of you are aware, we're dealing with key issues here for the village, and you have been from the beginning. You will all be aware that they remain priorities for council after the priority setting exercise of a month or so ago. So the recommendations that come from you will be addressing issues that council has committed itself to act upon. I think the goal, as far as I'm concerned here, is just to ensure we can develop an environment which is cooperative and we're sharing information as quickly as we have it. All of us recognizing that whatever recommendations may be made, that ultimately it's council's responsibility to make decisions, but it needs recommendations in front of it and may well have questions that we need to be able to respond to before it's going to make those decisions. So I just echo Jamie's comments, appreciative of all the work that all of you have done. Ian?
Okay, well, thanks. I guess the agenda that I'd like to follow, if it's okay with everyone, is I prepared a list of questions the committee has had as an ongoing issue. And there's a summary page at the beginning, which indicates the 6 main areas. And those are the 6 that I'd like, if we can, cover all 6 of them. If not, if we could do it in priority, the number 1 item being the operational manual and documentation of the water system. And then the second 1 item would be the sprinkler system and the recommendation there. And the third item would be the information on District of North Van letter from dating back to March 1st, 2019. And then I'd like to talk about, if we have time, the issues that were identified to council on September 23rd, 2020, or in the technical brief number 1. And then we could discuss, if appropriate, the information of questions that were outstanding in different pieces of correspondence that the committee has got. And then the last item would be prevention and mitigation activities, such as in support of the tree committee report, because that has some very important information regarding setbacks and fire smart conditions. So each one of those sections, there's also a discussion page for that information, but I don't think right now that we should go into that unless somebody wants to refer to that particular material when they're discussing things. So I don't want to be the only one talking, so I'm hoping that the other committee members will be prepared to participate in the discussion. I think from the point of view of the committee, everybody's here to get answers or to figure out how we can get answers. And it's been very frustrating in our history of the water committee, dating back to the first meeting, February 19th, 2019. And in that meeting, we requested certain pieces of information from the village, and little did we realize at the time that we would run into not being able to get this information. And here we are in 2021, now trying to develop the information that we were asking for back in 2019. So I know Lauren has diligently tried to find a lot of information that just isn't there. And so I don't think we need to prolong the agony of looking for information. I think it's important that we step ahead and actually develop the information ourselves. So that's all the information I would like to talk about right now. And I'd like to begin by having a discussion on the operational manual that we've got. And I think this is basically, we know the function of the current water system is to provide both potable water and also an optimized water storage system for firefighting. And whoop,
Happened there.
She's brought up a notice
Oh.
from point. Don't change it.
Okay.
So,
okay,
so yeah, Ian, could I just interject for a quick second?
sure,
We indicated we came with some
okay,
answers to some of the questions. And I was just going to ask Paula if in terms of what the outline that you have, and I think we can follow it, right, Paula, where we do have answers, correct? So you've popped up this first one, right? Which is the operating manual, correct?
Right, yes.
Yeah, so Ian, we're starting on, as I understand, your number one. And I
Yeah.
think there'll be a second document to accompany this. Is that correct, Paula?
There's no manual. It's a letter saying it's not there.
So I'll tell you what we'll do. That's what I was saying. There's two documents. So let's go back to the first one. Sorry. And then let's go to the second one. And then let's everybody that's involved in this, let's have a discussion. So Chris, do you want to speak to this one, please?
Yeah, so, in conversation with Lorna here, you're asking for a deadline to sort out this SOP here. So I can send over this note here to say, hey, we're anticipating to get it done by mid-July. So that's where we're working towards. And then earlier in the week, Lorna asked us for our table of contents of what we're working on for the SOP. So that's another piece that we've kind of sent over.
Right.
And what we're working on towards this SOP. Yeah, can scroll on a little bit more.
Okay, so why don't, now you've got a deadline for when we're looking to do it, and then Ian, here are some of the table of contents that are suggested, and we just wanted you folks to be able to make any comments or observations or thoughts or questions. Okay, and you may want to take a minute or two to just look at it.
Jamie, I might just note, Bruce here, that, I mean,
Yep.
for committee members, I mean, I think it's the first time they've seen
Yeah.
the draft. So we will, share the document subsequent to this call. This is not the last meeting we're going to have, but don't feel you have to offer suggestions in real time. You may well want to look at these and make recommendations. Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I just wanted them to have a look, and if something jumps up here, you're seeing something that's on it that should not be on it, or something that's omitted, then we'd love to hear, but we think we'll probably come back and discuss this more with you. Okay, so yeah, we'll get it out to you and you'll have a chance to respond.
Like, would it be possible just to have a short discussion on the manual, just like from a high level?
Sure. That's all right with people, correct, Ian? You're good with that? Yep.
certainly.
Okay, so I can do it different ways. I can ask a question to Chris. What is your because like operating manuals, and to me it's more operating and maintenance manual actually. We have to understand the intent and the objective here. So like, what is the objective of this manual exactly? Like, what is?
Yeah, so this one is more about, say, a new operator comes around, they should be able to pick up this manual and have a general idea of how to run the station that's in front of them. And so it's a general overview, and here's, if this thing's flashing, this is what this thing means, and this is how you resolve it to some degree, right? So it's kind of a general overview. And then in SOP, typically what we've done in the past is we refer a lot back to the operation and maintenance manuals, because that's a really important thing, right? Like the operation and maintenance manuals, I know for like the Tatlow station, there's 4 of them, and they're like all about 6 inches thick, right? Full of information. And so we're not re-representing that information in this SOP. It's a waste of time. And so what we do is we refer back to the operating manuals. Like, hey, here's some general pointers of what might be going wrong. However, refer back to the operation and maintenance manual section, blah, because that's where you'll get more detailed information on this, such as maintenance and schedules. It's, again, more of a reference document to help them go through and be like, oh, there's an O&M manual here, and here's where I find the real in-depth knowledge. Because again, pumps, right? Like there's a lot of components to pumps. You do certain things to pieces of pumps, and that's what the O&M manual will tell you on the breakdown of the pump.
Yeah, okay. No, it's because we have to, you know, because we can go on manuals. I've taken 2 years to write manuals, you know, it can get into very heavy details. But at one point, we have to realize that this is an existing system, and what is of value or what is missing from an operations point of view to have clarity for the village staff, the maintenance staff, but also for the well, what we normally call the chief operating officer, which in this case is like Lorna. And so that would include the maintenance schedules as to, for example, I don't know, this, the changing of oils and so on, and having some type of templates which can be filled out so that you can go back and you can follow the maintenance on some official records as to what has been done and what has been missed and so on. So, anyways, that's now coming back to the point I just wanted to make, because we haven't talked about the operating objectives. And so I would assume, and if you can confirm, that that the operating manual is how to operate the system for both potable water and for the fire flow. And so for the fire flow, which there's still, I understand that there's still some discussions in advancing the design on the upgrades, which is still ongoing, but the objective here is to optimize the level of water for fire flow protection, which will, from what we understand, most likely entail a need for chlorine, like additions in the tank. Now, is that being addressed, or is it just a very generic manual without stating that the Tatlow tank should be operated at this level or with these considerations, for example? Yeah,
like this thing it's not my understanding. This is what we understand of what we put in here would be more like the set points of the reservoir, and here's what they should be at based on whatever the operating procedure is at this point in time. Because again, it's the way I kind of look at this is, if there's a meteor storm or something and our computers don't work, you should be able to pick up this piece of paper and know where you need to set the set points and stuff of this station to get it working again. So that's where I kind of see this. I don't see it as a design manual telling you exactly how the station should work in relation to your fire flows. If that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, but I believe that's where there's a shortcoming in the way that the current system is being operated, where we do not have, where the levels in the reservoir are not maintained in view of the fire flow requirements. They're just operated for potable water, and so we are often very short. And if I can just reference, there's been different design briefs or memos or presentations that you have done, and it was kind of stated that in order to meet a certain flow, the reservoir, like you made certain assumptions on the reservoir levels, so it was already leading us to believe that this was the intent here, and so I believe it should be addressed, and I believe that is the intent, and I'm just going to invite council or Bruce to comment on that.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. I wanted to comment in any event. I think it's important to bear in mind that the mandate of this committee, it was fire flow. It wasn't ensuring domestic water supply. It was a concern about the adequacy of our fire flow. And I do agree. I mean, I think the committee has never, nobody on the committee has ever suggested to me we should sacrifice water quality for firefighting capacity. But I think the point Martin's making has been made numerous times that it's a, and in fact, the chair made it in his introductory comments, that the system is really intended to serve two purposes. Its dominant one is provision of potable water. And I think that's very well managed and been recognized. But we also do have a responsibility to provide fire flow. And yes, we'll have to protect domestic in doing that. But I think some of our decisions and some of our processes, I would hope, are going to end up being adjusted to improve fire flow circumstances. And that means that the manual should explain to staff that they really are trying to do two things. We understand they're not always compatible, and we appreciate that water quality is going to dominate when those two are in conflict. But I do think we have to have fire protection as an objective and lay that out.
Jump in. I don't disagree with what you're saying to some degree, but on an SOP, that isn't really, this isn't really the right document to put all that information into it. Like, you gotta think about this is for the operators, for them to understand what they're using and operating. Like all of the engineering, like I talk to operation guys all the time, like, I don't care about the engineering. Tell me how I'm supposed to operate this thing, because that's the important part. So if you want to keep in that information, maybe you should put it in the appendix to say, this is how we got to these set points, refer to appendix C. And you're gonna have a bit of a comprehensive report on what that might be, type of scenario.
Personally, yeah, I'm not a specialist in this. It just seems to me either there in an appendix or even in the introductory page or two, right? The system was incorporated at such and such a date. Its objective is to do this and this. You'll find, you know, this manual, which is periodically updated, covers the following topics. I mean, it doesn't have to be lengthy in my mind, Chris, just that I don't get the impression that we've ever made it clear to staff that fire protection is part of a dual responsibility on this.
It's semantics at this point, because like we have to state the objectives of the system, and which are obtained from the design part.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the objectives have to be stated, and that's where there's a link between various documents. Okay.
100%. You know, in fairness to operations, they know this system, you know, provides fire flow. They know that type of thing, right? And they also know that they're trying to keep good quality water for the municipality. And so I think that's maybe a disconnect here. It's that whatever is decided, that's great. You know, that would be represented in the set points of the station of the reservoir, right? Like that's where I keep going back to. It's like, I don't have any dog in this fight. Like, great. Like, you want it to be 80%. Say the set point is at 80%, and this is the elevation of that set point, and the low point is at 55%, and that's the elevation of that set point. That's what should be in the main document of this thing, because that's what operations will care about, maintaining and operating. You can then look, you know, say the general intent is for this station to have fire flows, and if you want a real in-depth look into why we set them at this point, here's the technical engineering document, the support thing, right? And, you know, again, operators, they will say, well, I'm not an engineer and I'm an operator. Like, that's a lot of technical mumbo jumbo, Chris. Like, I just want to know where I'm supposed to put this station at.
Yeah.
Right? Like that would be their you know, my experience with operators, that's what they care about.
Okay. The second point I wanted to make, if I can just come back, is on the maintenance side there. I'm not exactly sure as to the maintenance, the documentation. I mean, I've seen what Bernie showed me as to what they call the operating and maintenance manual, which was somewhat a mishmash of different technical sheets and so on, but it didn't have any structure in it. And so on the maintenance side, you know, there are some routine maintenance activities which need to take place. And there's, you know, I always come back to one which I make reference to the committee, and it was tabled to Fraser Health by the village staff a couple of years ago in 2018, that the intent was in 2019 to perform some non-destructive testing on the Untitled tank. Was this done? Had the results been provided? It's you know, these are one of the building blocks in order to maintain an asset over many, many years, to have these records on and show any progression in corrosion rates or degradation of the coat or the protective coatings on the tank. It's not one specific reading, it's more a trend which you need to keep. And that's where it's an important. So if I can just ask a question to Lorna, was this inspection ever performed in 2019? It was stated in the report to Fraser Health.
Well, in 2018, Larry Scott would have written that report, I believe. And then in 2019, Bernie was here. So I don't know, when you met with him, did he?
No, I'm just referring to a statement that was written in what, like all this information used to be public. We used to have that on the village site, all the reports that were sent over to Fraser Health on the quality of our potable water, and in there was some comments on the maintenance of the system. Inside one of them, there was just indicating that this was an inspection to be performed in the subsequent years. I never heard anything. Did that inspection ever take place? So this is where the maintenance instructions become fundamental in importance to ensure that the maintenance is follows a certain guideline that's normally done by the design engineer in order to ensure that the asset has its expected service, for example.
I can look into that. Chris and I can do that.
Yeah. So there's other, there's a whole bunch of different maintenance instructions. Was this going to be integrated in the SOP or?
So again, that's where I'm kind of a little bit misunderstanding a little bit on this. I don't disagree. There should be maintenance done on these things, but are you asking that the SOP should have all of the schedules when it's done inserted into the SOP, or just saying you should be doing these things and here's a standard template to do it?
My point is, it's because I always objected in the term SOP that it was more an owner's and maintenance manual that was required.
I think that's where I'm a little confused. A lot of the stuff that you're talking about is kind of above what an SOP would really do, a standard operating procedure. You're talking about maintaining documents within what should be. You make it once and it's there, and this is how this thing operates, not continually updating it with testing information, right? To me, that's something slightly different than an SOP.
Okay, fair enough. And I'll just like to table that there appears to be a shortcoming on, Lorna, do you have a manual or templates on the maintenance which needs to be done on the complete system, be it on the fire hydrants, be it on the Tatlow tank, on the pumps, and so on?
Do you?
I don't have them, but I'm sure they do in the water department and the maintenance department. You were in here for half a day. I don't know. Did you see those things?
I just know it
Showed you through the system?
I just went through a one manual, and like I said, it was kind of a disorganized collection of paper.
So why don't we do this right now, not to quell that piece, but there's some information being sought. We don't have it at, Lorna's saying she doesn't have it at her fingertips. Martin, it does sound important. Let's at least get it. And then hopefully we can return back to say, yes, if it's valuable information, does it reside in this document, right?
Right.
Okay, because it doesn't sound like, Lorna, in answer to that question, we're going to be able to get it right now, right?
Yeah.
That's right. Yes.
Okay, but we can't commit to get whatever the information is in a reasonable period of time, right? Because Lorna's obviously going to have to go over to Public Works and, and talk with the people that would have that. And if they have it, we'll be able to take a look at it as a group. If they don't, we'll be able to figure out what we need to do, because those are, all right?
Yeah, so like there's another example that comes to mind just as a side note is, I have several records of the pressure readings at the fire hydrants and the flows at the test flows. The templates are somewhat very difficult to understand. And I'm not sure they're done on a regular basis, but once again, this is the key information that hopefully that Chris has in order to, there's several uses that he can make of that. It's a fairly informative piece of record.
Yeah, and I think that's what I need a little direction on here. Is that what you want included in this manual? Like, it can be done, but under my understanding right now, that is not something that I am doing, including.
It's my view. We can ask council and we can ask the various committee members. It's what I identified as a shortcoming or a missing piece.
If I may comment.
I know that the maintenance on the hydrants is done on a regular basis, but I don't overview what the water operators, how they write it out, but they do maintenance on a regular basis.
I think this is where I was having trouble understanding without an outline of what was this document was going to be look like. And the one problem I have is that my background is in hazard analysis. And the term SOP refers to one thing, and in our system, it would be the chlorination levels in the water for the potable water. There's only one SOP in our operating system. And that was one of the things that we were trying to understand. How is the chlorine levels being measured? Where are they being measured? And how does the chlorine levels suddenly translate into the need for spilling of water? I don't understand the science behind those statements. And I keep hearing spilling water is a necessity in order to increase the chlorine level in the tank or in the water system. And that I would need to see how that's done. And that's where this procedure,
Little blue hand.
or what I would call an SOP, would be involved. I think that what we're talking about here for Chris is that the outline is much broader than just this one small area.
Okay.
So I guess the question in my mind is, I think this is the first time we've sat down with Chris to talk about it, and there's not a clear focus on what's the terms of reference for this manual.
So if I can just because we're kind of going about it backwards, like normally we start off, what are the issues?
Right.
like what is missing here in the, like in the village, and then we have the objectives for the manual that we are trying to produce. But the issues, we would need to table them out, and Chris would have some valuable input into that as to what he sees as issues, both from the operating and from the maintenance side.
Yeah.
Okay. Chris, do you want to respond to that, and then I'll go to Jim?
Jim had his hand up first.
Yeah. Okay. He's had it. Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to jump in. So Jim, go ahead. Thanks for your patience.
Yeah, with regards to the manuals, I mean, in my industries, we're pretty well used to a quality assurance manual, and it comes with a quality control manual as well. And I think that you have to have that so that you can, if you're going to do any maintenance whatsoever, you do have to have a quality control section and quality assurance as well. So I'm not sure where you're going to start and divide them, but the other thing I was curious about is has Chris, all the manuals you're referring to that they have up there, Do you feel they're complete?
That's a good question.
Maybe the wrong question, but
O&M manuals, like whenever you go through an O&M manual, like I think Martin said earlier, it's full of data sheets and all kinds of,
well, I appreciate that's what should be there right from day one.
and they're full of stuff that you don't really need as well. So it's a really hard question to answer. Do I know if there has all the information? I'll be honest with you. I haven't gone through the 2,000 pages of information that's probably contained in there and digest it all to decide if it's all warranted or not. It's probably in some degree warranted and needed at some point in time, but I don't know if it's something you know.
Well, I certainly agree with your comments, but I mean, to say every time you do certain maintenance, then there should be a set schedule and how to describe the maintenance that was done. And I think that's what Martin was getting at. I think he's used to that, and we all are. When something's had to be repaired, we got to designate what we did to it, when we did it, and who did it.
Yeah, and I think that's where my disconnect is here. My, what I perceive as an SOP document compared to what you guys are describing is something quite different. Like it's an amalgamation of an SOP, operation and maintenance manuals, and a technical document on how to as well. And I don't disagree. There's value in all of these things. It's just my understanding of what was required compared to what you guys are saying. I think it's perhaps quite different.
I guess the other slight question is is this somewhat similar to other systems that you worked on, such as Anmore, developing manuals for them?
No, this is quite different what you guys are asking for. I think that's the other thing. Most municipalities, when they talk about an SOP, is very a generalized document that allows the operators to be a new operator to come in, pick it up, and understand how the thing operates, not how to maintain it and all the other bits and pieces. That it's kind of something a little bit different in my eyes. That's where you have, like your superintendent, like knows more about all of those things compared to your general water operator. Your water operator, knows how to turn valves and some other stuff. Like they're not all that technical.
Well, are we trying to develop? There's an indication that we're trying to develop something here? If everybody that operates this gets hit by a bus, we can hand them a manual and away they go.
It's a great question, right? I think that's my thing. Is like I see this as a document that something happens to your station. What's going on with my station in generality? This is probably what's going on. I can hopefully fix it if I can't get hold of the superintendent, what have you. Compared to what you guys are saying, it's more of a way more comprehensive review of the station and operation manual and all the other bits.
So
it can be done.
Let me come in for a second if I could, because I think one of the questions that I think we need to be looking at, and and I think Chris actually had in mind to talk about it, but what happens if everybody gets hit by a bus? So we, in every employer has this right now. People leave for a variety of reasons. So we've had one person leave. We're having one person come on, and we actually, that's in our line of things to share with you, right? But when that person comes on, for example, 50% of the people that do the day-to-day work are not there, right? So the person's going to come on. Luckily, we've got a very competent, qualified person to do it. But what if they're both gone for some reason? So the question is, do we have something that tells you how to operate, or do we have something that also tells you either in the document or somewhere else how we maintain it? Because those schedules, like literally, I've been in places in work situations where you have 2 to 3 people are in a place to do that operating and the maintenance. And for whatever reason, they are either permanently gone or off. And sometimes for long periods of time. So that is a piece. Like, we're not talking about something that could happen. We have very good employee leave for what most employers say are very positive reasons for a family and going and doing things, but we lost 50%. And we have someone who's doing some good work, but is new to that whole system. Correct, Lorna?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct.
So we have 3 people that are involved. One's brand new and one's fairly new and is doing a lot of things to not only get familiar, but he's taking the waters course, as I understand, right?
That's right.
So
And
it's
he's
not
writing out the procedures.
yeah. So how do we, and Jim, we'll go back to you, and Chris, you both got your hands up.
Can I just comment, Jamie, that,
Sure.
that what we've talked about for the last 5 minutes really emphasizes the point that Martin made. That what we have not had, and Chris didn't have, is a brief description of what it is we're trying to solve. What are the issues?
I mean, if I step back into my experience in industries, we made manuals in such a fashion that we could hand them to people in the production area and they could carry on no matter what person was there.
Yeah.
Now, that may be a lot more detail than they require in this industry. So that's not for me to decide what quality or what level you start. So that's something like Martin would know better, and Chris, because they're familiar with this kind of thing. So they start off with a certain amount of detail, but not too much detail.
Yeah.
I'll finish with that there.
Maybe I could suggest, it seems to me that we haven't got the terms of reference nailed down yet. That Chris has got one view of what he's doing, and the water committee has a different view of what's needed.
Oh, you're off. Okay.
And how do we go about getting this back on track?
Yeah, but in fairness to Stuart there, I think Stuart is working on a bunch of these things in the background as well. And maybe it's a case that I need to sit a little bit more with Stuart and provide this information into this document. Like I said, maybe, we don't call it an SOP, we call it something different. I don't care what we call it, as long as it meets your needs of what you need. And bring in Stuart onto some of these other things of like, Stuart's been going through the maintenance manuals. He's been setting out these schedules as I understand it. So, we can bring that information forward and put it into this document. And I think it doesn't need to be me who does it, it needs someone to do it type of thing, right? And I think, as long as we capture that information, put it in the right position, like the document will meet the needs that you need then, I think. Because I can't do all this, some of that stuff is, I need a mechanic type of thing, right? Like I'm not an expert on pulling pumps apart and putting pumps back together, or draining the oil and all that kind of stuff, right? That's for mechanics and operators and all the other bits and pieces. So I think it's amalgamation of the group to perhaps get to what you want to get to with this document. But I think very much so, I think perhaps we do need to make sure we're on the same page for the terms of reference, because I think right now, this past 45 minutes has told me we're not on the same page, I think, right now.
That's what I hear too, so.
Yeah. So
in fairness, that is something that the water committee could recommend. It's exactly the kind of things your committee is looking at.
Yeah. So here's a piece. Part of what we need to do, and Chris, you may have talked about it, is, and Jim and others, we need a document that there's an operating piece and there's a maintenance piece. They may not be in the same, but we also need this. When someone new comes on, brand new, needs to be able to come in with their skills and be able to look at a manual and do that work. And at some point, they're going to be needing to do that maintenance work. And Lorna said, good questions. We'll come back. We'll give you a sense of what that maintenance looks like, right? But we actually have that precise situation. We have someone starting in no time flat who is competent, qualified, and needs to, at some point pretty quickly after that, open a manual and see if he can go off and do the work. We're going to luckily have someone with him who knows the system, right? But the question can be asked, looking at that manual, could you do it alone? That's one of the tests, right?
Yes, and in fairness to Chris, I will say the motion that council passed is what he was following up on.
Yeah.
So probably, this is really good that you're having the meeting with the water committee now.
Yeah. Well, and I guess it would help for me, that piece about, is there a second part to this? And we're hopeful there is, because we think you can give good counsel. And when we're doing that, we finally get the piece, we got to go back to council as a whole and say, okay, this is what we're looking to do, right? But I mean, with good input, and there is that piece of, what it contains exactly, we're probably not going to be able, even if we spend another 45 now, do it, right? So Lorna, you've got some things you're bringing back. Chris can do some things, and we may, that discussion with Stuart may be helpful. He may be moving ahead with some things right now that are that are actually being contemplated by this committee. Okay?
Hey, I had my hand up earlier and it was to
Yeah,
answer
go ahead.
that Ian asked about the chlorination level and what have you. So when you hear about them like letting water out of the system, what that's to do with within a water system, it's basically the chlorine within the water system, it gets eaten up by things, right? Like one, it evaporates. Two, if it does come into contact with any kind of bacteria, it kills the bacteria but uses up the chlorine level. So when you have water sit within a pipe for too long, basically the chlorine gets eaten up, and the standards say you have to a certain level of chlorine. And so the way that a lot of operators do it is that they will flush the system in a large amount to turn over that water. And I think that's maybe what the guys were referring to, where they drip off the water. They have a constant discharge out of the pipes to some degree at a small level, just so the water keeps refreshing itself. And that especially happens on dead ends. And that's what the big issue is when it's on a dead end road, there's not much water being drawn from it. It means that there's too much water in the pipe, and therefore the chlorination levels start dropping, and that's where they'll then flush the system and get it to become higher chlorine levels again, because your main source has the right level of chlorine in it. I don't know if that answers you, Ian.
I agree, Chris. That's exactly what I expect, but I have asked this question of Lorna as to where this large spillage was taking place, and I walked around the whole village and could not find any evidence of spillage. I see sampling stations spilling 1 liter per minute of water, but that's not what I would expect that you would be saying is the large spilling.
I'll tell you where they are. I don't even see, just the big red things with 2 like kind of ports on the side and 1 on the front. That's where the guys use to turn over.
Exactly. That's what I would expect too, but I don't see that. I see the little tiny sampling stations being used as spilling stations.
They flush the hydrants as well. I know they do, because that's the only way you can get velocity within the pipes to actually kick out any crap that's in the pipe as well. So they also have to do it with what's I can never remember the exact technical term, basically anti-chlorination tablets, because you can't just flush chlorine down.
Fair enough. And I think that this illustrates the kind of problem that without the manual describing what we're actually talking about, there's a disconnect between spilling water and flushing dead end lines.
I don't want to get into an argument about it, but I would say that is like, as a water operator and having your license and getting your level 1, your level 2 and higher, like the testing is quite substantial, and they have to prove out that they know how to maintain the system.
On the assurance, you see.
And so like that's where I'm kind of like, I don't know if you need to write that down, because the problem is if your operators don't know how to do that, you've got a way bigger problem, because they shouldn't have a license type thing, right? And I think that's a little bit of, I think the best point that you guys, I think, are making, and I agree, and to be perfectly frank, every municipality is going through it right now, is that transition of knowledge is very difficult, and it's a risk, and how do you manage that risk, right? And it's like, do you do it through writing these manuals, and they're very, very detailed, and you spend a lot of money on it, and you mitigate your risk, right? I get why people do that. Other times, some people roll the dice and be like, what's the likelihood of all 3 of them leaving at the same time? I don't know. It depends on how bad if something happens, type of thing, right? Like that's where I don't disagree with some of the stuff you're saying. It's just some things I'm like, I don't think you need to write that down, because that is part of the training.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like, you shouldn't get too detailed. Sometimes you can only make reference to their to some type of certification document that they have in their training, and you just leave it at that, because you don't want to go too far in those details, because then you may say things will come back and eat you afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. As an engineer, you understand what I'm talking about. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So like that's my spiel there. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, I don't know where we're going to go with this, Jamie, but it seems to me that it comes back to what needs to be in the outline, and what's the objective of this manual.
Yeah. So here, why don't we look to kind of bring this to conclusion? Let's go to Jim if it's okay, because we've got some things coming back. We just haven't established that we're coming back. And our hope is, Bruce, myself, staff, that we can come back to do part 2 on this. And we need to have some time tonight to talk about what that looks. So if it's all right with people, because we've got some information come back, can we go to Jim and then either move on to the next step or see if we can share with you the answers we have, Ian, and then go through the questions then. I don't know, we're fine either way, but we'd like to get our answers out tonight, right?
Yeah, let's do it now because I think we've only got about a half hour left, so.
Yeah, so let's go to Jim. You've got a quick point to make?
It comes right back to the quality assurance section. I know I keep referring to my own business, but if I wanted to check something thoroughly, I would go to the quality assurance department and look at their manuals and look at their books and see what they've been writing down and just make sure they're regularly doing it. That's all.
Okay, good, thank you. And so Ian, you're good and the committee's good if we've got some things up that Paul is ready to put up. And
Okay.
let's take a look at them. We can go through as quickly or slowly, and then let's then spend some time about, I don't think we're going to get through all the questions, but let's talk about how we can kind of manage that and maybe talk about come back together. So you want to just go with, we were talking about what if you got a new employee? We're asked the question about a new employee, right? So can you pop that up? And it'll take a second. So we are actually, Lorna, you
Yes.
headed the search, so please go ahead. It was your work and others that helped bring this about.
Yeah, so I posted an ad and with BOABC, and we received some good applications. 3 interviews were set up, 2 from external people and 1 from internal. And the first round of interviews took place with Stuart and myself, and then the second round of interviews were with Mayor Ross and Councillor Drake. And when we came to the second round of interviews, the one outside candidate withdrew because he had already accepted another position. And we did interview Ali Sundariki, who is the successful water operator level 1, who has really good experience and has worked with, he's from Alberta and has worked with water metering quite significantly. And I thought that was really important given the direction that council is talking about going. And so Ali is starting on June 21st. He is from the Lower Mainland originally. So that also makes it easier. Someone is coming from outside to, you know, just different cost of living and everything in the Lower Mainland. Yes, so we got very successful with our competition.
Sure. Thank you, Lorna. That's great. And I think 2 things. One is that other external candidate who was qualified, who, as we were actively recruiting, and Lorna and I talked and we looked at moving through as quickly as we can, you lose candidates. That's how competitive it is right now. The second thing is actually Councillor Drake's coming up for the next set of interviews if they come to be for anything. And Councillor Clark helped on that one.
Oh, right, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. No worries at all. But, you know, and then council as a whole endorsed that decision. So supported that decision. So we've, you know, we were aware people were quite concerned about not having qualified person, and we do. And the good news is, as Lorna said, they're from the area. So that's one of the things as a prospective employer you look at. Hopefully there's some connection that would cause them to stay longer rather than shorter, or actually show up for the job. And we're confident on those measures.
Yes.
So any questions on that? We're back up to where we should be on the 21st. Okay, so we'll sound good to everybody on the committee. We'll go to the next one. And Lauren, I think this is with the water supply. This is yours.
Oh, yes, the one from Sean Rooney.
Yeah, we'll wait. Yeah, one, I think Paul's just gonna get it up.
Yeah, she's working.
I'll
on
ask if, okay, perfect. Okay. Lauren,
This is an email that I received from the District of North Vancouver. I resent the original letter to the Chief Administrative Officer to find out where they were on the motion. I can show you that letter too that was sent in by council. And this was the email I received back. So the original engineer who was working on doing the calculations that we had talked about, and Chris and I had talked to her, she's now on leave. And so Sean Rooney is now taking over, doing the calculations, and they say that they will have this information to us by the end of the month. So we're looking forward to receiving that information back from DNV. And we could pull the letter up to Paula now, please, for that's the letter that went to the District of North Vancouver with the motion that was passed by Valcara Council.
thank you, Lorna. So why don't, if there's any questions from anybody on the committee or thoughts or comments?
I have one, and that's just that the amounts of the flow are 60, 90, and 120 liters per second, which is substantially higher than what we've got now. But so I'm not, would it have been better to go for 30 or 40 and then move up? But
I'm confused of a wording because it states three numbers, fire flows rather than water deliveries. Can you elaborate on that, Chris?
I can't, not with regards to the letter, but I can tell you the conversation that I had with, to make it complicated, Sean, who was the person who's now on leave. I spoke to her, a number of times, and I said, what I really need, they were working on a new water model. I kind of said, what I really need is that water model when you're done with it and you've calibrated it, so I can play around with it, so I can understand what we can do with the flows. And in reality, it's like, I kind of, again, talking to her, it's like, hey, even if you can get us to 30, what does that look like? And, the 60, I said this before, we all know the 120 is like, we're not doing that type of thing, right? Like, it's a non-starter. We know that's not going to go anywhere, right? It's really about what can we do to improve our situation to some degree without costing too much money, and then a middle one, and then the Cadillac, which we know we're not going to go after type of scenario. And so that's where I'm kind of was talking with her, like, hey, what I need is your model so I can understand what you guys have got and allowable flows to come over, what that would look like. And so that was a conversation her and I were having as engineers together of understanding. So I see that letter, and it's like, okay, fine. In reality, once they're done with the model, I can use their model and get the answers I need myself.
So the question is only on the technical capacity on that they evaluate with their model, and they will not necessarily provide the entailed costs on their end. Yeah,
and I said to Shona, like, I don't need you to tell me that, because that they'd have to go to a consultant to do that probably anyway. I said, what I need to know is it that it's your PRV station needs upgrading, or this length of pipe doesn't meet the capacity, because I can do that costing, that's easy type of thing, right? I don't need them to go out and come back. What I need to know is what is the thing that's under servicing us type of thing, and so we can understand what upgrades we need to do to complete that requirement to provide additional flows. Okay. However, there was something that I was looking at earlier this afternoon, and maybe one of you guys can elaborate. I saw the questions and answers. Maybe this is coming later, so if it is, just stop me. That Walt Bayless was talking about, he doesn't believe that you can get any more than 30 liters a second through the pipes at this point in time. And I honestly, I saw that. I'm like, I don't know where he's driving at. I don't understand that. Maybe it's something, there's a restriction system that I don't know, and kind of like, okay.
Yeah, I discussed that point with Ian. It's a little bizarre. And is it because of the pressure, their limitations on pressure on their existing system, or what, I don't know the background information behind that. So it's difficult to understand what Bayless's comment without the context. And
Yeah.
explanations.
Because I saw that and I was like, my common sense tells me you got two, 8-inch pipes. You can deliver more than 30 liters. a
You
second.
can deliver way more.
Yeah, and so maybe it's just a limitation he knows of this system that, like you just said, Martin, maybe it needs a pump station to increase the pressure or something. It's a current limitation, but it's something that could be resolved without having to relay new pipes and stuff.
So disregard that comment from Walt, I believe.
Okay, cool. Okay, thanks.
Okay, Doug, that got what you were asking?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
good.
Okay, thank you. So I think we,
Okay, so as I understand it, we'll be getting some sort of answer by, what was it, the end of this month? From District to North Van?
I believe so.
That's what they said, yes.
yep, that's what they're telling us, and we will stay connected, and that's when they write it to us.
Yeah,
We're hopeful, but could there be some anticipated thing? But we're going to keep working with them to help try and get that deadline done, right?
okay, good.
Okay,
Anyone under the bus, I can use this big old word, but I've heard the same thing from them for the past year or so, and so I'm going to hold my breath on that one. So we'll see.
yeah, and in fairness to, I mean, I'm always cautious in regular times, and we've, every big municipality with COVID is facing it different than us. So I think my caveat was we're going to do our best, stay connected. Chris, you may have been at this longer than me, but we both been around deadlines. So
yeah.
let's keep forward. And we wanted to give you the information we had at the time. And then we've got the mid-July already. And then I think we don't have anything more to put up, right, Paula? We're good on the.
We just have the questions and answers that Chris wrote out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, let's get that up then. And then we've got one more that we'll have someone speak to.
No, that one.
Yeah.
Just a few of the questions that Ian had asked, and Chris wrote out the answers in blue.
Yeah.
I mean, I told some of these, I think we've kind of gone through these this evening here regarding number one. I think some disconnect here in regards to expectations of what I was doing compared to what you guys were looking at, so we can reevaluate that one. So the sprinkler system ones, I still haven't received an official email from Fraser Health. I've spoken with them a couple of times now, and I've kind of asked them, can you put this down in an email for me so I can send it on to council? The short version is they reiterated what I've kind of said previously. It's like they are always concerned about cross connections between our potable system and being connected to a private system. And he kind of pointed out a number of issues where they've had boil water advisories out in the valley, because this isn't really a thing that happens in the lower mainland these days, because most people are not using wells in lower mainland. So therefore it's more in rural communities that this happens. And he was saying, they've had a number of instances over the years where they've had to have boil advisories. And he said, that's a good scenario. They've actually, I tried looking it up. I didn't see it online. He said, that's if it's just a bacterial issue. They said they've had issues in the past where it's been more of a chemical issue, where it's then boil water advisory. It's you don't get to turn it off until they've sorted it. So again, I just reiterate, I really don't recommend having a private system attached to a public system when it comes to
Agreed.
I can't read it enough. It's not a good idea. Please don't do it.
I beg you not to do it.
It would be high risk, wouldn't it?
It'd be high risk for low reward.
Yeah, I was going to say for little or no gain.
Yeah.
Chris, it's Bruce. Yeah, I actually think the recommendation though from the water committee simply had to do with making sprinkler systems mandatory, I believe. I may be wrong, and I'll take
That's correct.
in.
Yeah, that's what we
Yeah,
had asked for.
I appreciate you did comment during one council meeting on this issue that you're dealing with here, but it wasn't, that wasn't the core recommendation from this committee.
Yeah. But I think
We're going to get the sprinkler systems in just a moment anyway.
yeah, but it was brought up by a member of the water committee, I believe, wasn't it?
True. Yes.
Yeah. So good delineation on that. In terms of, does anybody want to comment on Chris's answer back? Or Martin, you did. Anybody else on the committee or any thoughts?
Well, I think he's right.
Okay. Well, if I just didn't want to shut anything down, so why don't we move forward, Chris? I think 3, we've had the update now, correct? As good as it can be. And then number 4, Chris?
Yeah, I wasn't aware what this technical memo was, and then Lorna has since sent it over to me, so I've kind of started looking into it.
Yeah, the critical one, Chris, is the fact that the seismic valve has been decommissioned. So now we've got the original design of the water system has been compromised by that decision. And I think you should have a real close look at, I know that they had a lot of problems keeping the valve functioning because of the sensitivity of the valve, but that decommissioning a valve that's function is to stop the tank from draining during seismic events doesn't sound to me like a good decision.
Yeah, I shouldn't chuckle, but I do know, in working with operators a lot, I can see the conversation that happened, and it probably had a few F-bombs in it, and I'm fed up with this thing. I don't want it online anymore because I can't keep it running. My day-to-day job's hard enough already. I just want to take it, get it out of my hair. And I bet you that's what happened. I don't know for certain if that's what's happened. I suspect that is what's happened. And they got frustrated and said, "Screw it. I can only get it to work if I do this." You're right. It has a good purpose to it, and there was a reason why it was installed. I think it's something that you can ask operations again to review and see if there's something. Maybe there's a new updated piece that can be put in there to deal with the sensitivity side of it, because I'm sure they just get frustrated with it closing down continually and stuff.
Well, the problem should be solved by the company that supplied the valve.
Exactly, and that's what I mean, right? Maybe now there's an update or something they can do to try and get it up and running.
So Chris, building on the good discussion with Ian, can you go work with our folks on that to try and see if we can? I mean, you've given us the reality of being an operator of a water system, but can you work on that point that I think you and Ian both agreed on? Maybe there's a piece that can be done to get it back to where it should be. And then we're still going to get to whether we meet again, and if we do, how. But does that make sense, Chris?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, good.
Although I would say I don't know if there's a silver bullet to fix the situation. So I can go and have a conversation and see if there's something that can be done. But I suppose then there's a question back to you guys would be, what do you want to do? The system keeps on clamping down because of the sensitivity of this thing, and there isn't really a resolve to it.
If I can just put it into context, the seismic valve, I mean, it's a reliability issue. It's not an operational issue.
Yeah.
And so you're looking at this improbable event, but which can occur. And if it occurs, you do want to have your water system. So, in my line of business, we identify the issue. It's just then we prioritize the issues, and let's say it should be maintained as an issue, but it's not, it's not something that needs to be like resolved in the next couple of months, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe we'll get something back, and then we can kind of set a timeline for that.
Yeah, it needs to be looked at. What are the solutions? What are the mitigation measures, and then make a decision when all that information is collected.
Yeah. Okay, and that's helpful, Martin and Chris. So thank you both. And Ian?
Just, sorry, I wanted to just say on that number 6, if it's
Yeah.
okay, that I just wanted them to know that Blackwell was at council a couple of meetings ago, and that they are working on Fire Smart in the village. So we received a $25,000 grant for that work to be done. And then we also have a grant submitted with Port Coquitlam and Coquitlam for further grant money to work on Fire Smart issues in the village. So that is under.
Thank you, Lorna. So that's, some of those things are getting at questions that were highlighted in yours, Ian. And we're probably at the point right now, Lorna, where we can move to our next presentation. Is that correct? Which would be Bruce Drake.
Oh, yes, yes. We don't have anything to
Yeah.
put up, but yes. Mhm.
What's that?
We don't have anything to show
So,
on. the
yeah,
screen.
no, that's why I wanted to just cue everyone. Bruce has something around the sprinkler where well, Bruce, you can go over and why don't you jump right into it? So you'll hear from Bruce
Great.
without a document.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jamie. So committee members will recall one of your first recommendations was that we require sprinklers with new construction and with major renovations within the village. And council ultimately accepted that advice and thought to move ahead on that, only to be told by the provinces we could not do so. My understanding at that time was that there was a mechanism for appeal of that rejection by the province, and that we could pursue that. Now, we've since learned that the appeal process isn't as straightforward as one might hope. So just about a week ago, Mayor Ross, Lorna, and I had a conversation with an official with the provincial government, and that involved two parties. Tracy Olson, who's a senior policy analyst for Building and Standards Branch for the Office of Housing and Construction. She is the expert on this particular topic. And then her supervisor, Junish Jensen, also joined us for a good portion of that discussion. And they explained the background on sprinkler and sprinkler applications within British Columbia. And we won't get into the painful details. Suffice it to say, it's complex. There's lots of players involved. As some of you know, there was a committee that was being asked to look at this and seek to find a way to rationalize it. They made some recommendations. Shortly put, and I can sympathize, having done this at the federal level, they discovered that the legislation they had wouldn't allow them to implement the recommendations of that committee. And so they had to change the legislation. That hasn't yet happened, and then they had to change the government. The government, as they pointed out, its priorities for this government include housing affordability, maintaining low cost of construction, home ownership accessibility, which of course is housing affordability as well, and then energy efficiency in construction. So that was, in my opinion, reasonably subtle way of saying that it's not a first priority of this government. But having said that, they have at the administrative level charged Tracy with trying to put together a proposal to move this forward. I don't hold high hopes for that, but I hold much higher hope for some of the things that flowed out of that discussion. So briefly put, if we want to appeal this, they advised us that no municipality has thus far undertaken this appeal, which is referred to as a local authority variation under 6 and 7 of the Building Act. If you do so, then it's a little like our doing a requested zoning modification at the village level. All costs are borne by the village. So we want to do this. We will pay for their staff time. We will pay for any experts they feel they need to assess it. We will have to generate documents that meet their standards for explaining why we should be different than other municipalities. So that's one option we would have. The other option we have is to wait until they finish their process. And that, as we're all aware, could make North Vancouver look speedy. There is a process of getting the ducks lined up so that the province is prepared to move ahead on an initiative. And I don't personally hold out high hopes for that happening quickly, but that is what this Tracy is working on. However, near the end of the conversation, they mentioned that there is another factor that can play into requirements for sprinkler systems, and that is the the timeliness or the speed with which a fire department can access a building. Now, it's not an area. You can't define the entire community for that. It's site specific, but you need to establish that the fire department cannot reliably get to that particular location within 10 minutes of having been notified. And we'll pass on documents that lay out the details of that. It specifically is from the time the fire department's made aware till the first firefighting equipment arrives at the site. So it doesn't mean fire flow has to have started. It doesn't include the time you call 911. It includes the time for when the department is notified. And that, as Jim knows well, and Doug no doubt as well, there can be quite a lapse between the 911 and the referral over to the fire department. So it's a narrowly defined window. But in the event that you can't guarantee that kind of service, the municipalities already having jurisdiction can advise a builder that there are certain precautions they're going to have to take. And that can include such things as increasing the setback property lines, utilizing non-flammable materials virtually everywhere, i.e. constructing with concrete, is the example they use. You can, and also limitations on the windows facing other buildings in the area. So you can find yourself with quite a confined range of options, or you can offer them the option of sprinkling and then restoring the setback provisions and others that were cited. Now, I want to emphasize we're very early in looking at this. We will share with you the documents, but it'd be nice to jump to the conclusion that it gives us the power we're looking for. I don't believe it necessarily does. I just to cite a few issues, and both Doug and Jim will be sensitive to these. We wouldn't want to implement, take a position on the Saskatchewan Volunteer Fire Department, for example, that led to downgrading of everyone's insurance. I don't think that would be a terribly clever move. So we have to be careful as to exactly what this would allow us to do and what the practical implications are. I'd also note, I think, as you know, that a significant majority of the recently built houses have sprinkled. I'm working off the top of my head, but numbers, I think it was 10 out of 14, Lorna, something like that, in the last 3 to 4 years. So we're talking about a subset of that construction, i.e. for the 14, so about 30% that aren't yet. And some of those it might be possible to encourage by this means. Now you'll note that since I ran right past it, I am not of the opinion that we should sign on for making an appeal where we have to cover all the costs. The final step in that process, after we've met every requirement they specify and we've paid all the costs, is that it's taken to a minister with the set of priorities that I mentioned earlier of this government, and the minister can say yes or no. Recognizing that not one municipality has done this so far, I really am not eager to be the first one to trot. We explained to them what a 1% tax increase generated for us in terms of revenue, and that makes fairly clear to them how small we are. Now, I would say it's because they're sympathetic with the situation. We did describe the unique challenges we face, as indeed our documentation has already. And they were, I think that's why they cited this instance, that we should look at the question of level of fire protection and whether it's a speedy enough response. Now, following that meeting, I just want to add that Tracy was good enough to send us a number of studies and documents. First, she sent a copy of the information bulletin that relates to this response time for fire departments. She had, we also got a document from April 2005, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, that looked at the utility of smoke alarms and sprinklers in Canadian homes. And finally, a National Research Council statistical analysis on housing sprinkler systems. I have to tell you, in having had a look at those, it also is quite sobering as to the comparative advantage of alarms versus the advantage of sprinklers. Your likelihood of saving lives with an investment in alarms is much faster than with sprinklers. Obviously, sprinklers bring the risk of death down close to zero, but you can get an awful lot of that benefit with the alarms. Anyway, I haven't formed a conclusion personally, but we'll share all those documents with you, and you might want to have a close look at them. It does, there's some very useful summaries in there. I'll stop there, Jamie, in case there are questions.
Bruce, thank you very much for a really good presentation of what we heard. And why don't we just move out to the committee to make any comments on that? And then if we can, then maybe have a discussion about next steps from here. But let's first do any reactions you have. And you don't have to have them right now. You've just kind of heard it. But Martin, did you want to add on?
No, I just appreciate the level of discussions that were undertaken. It's typical of of what I've seen before. In the past, we used a specialized firm like Morrison Hirschfield to do these code compliance and discussion issues with the various levels of government. The point I just like to make on, I agree on an appeal. It's just it's kind of a no-brainer on that one. But on the premises, I found it interesting. The premises that they were proposing, if the time between a call and the arrival is not sufficient, then that would be the premises to go ahead with a local bylaw, from what I understand. Is that correct?
No, Martin, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. I mean, they emphasize, and the documents emphasize, it is site specific. So you want to build home A at location B. Yeah. The building inspector can look at that location and say, look, we're not confident that we have the fire response in that location that is required. And therefore, I'm going to tell you, you're going to have to meet these restrictions, right? You're going to have to use, non-flammable material. You're going to have larger setbacks, or you may want to consider sprinkling, in which case we'll bring you back to the usual standard in terms of setback.
But I understand that the intent behind there is similar to the issue that we have in Belcarra with the limited amount of water.
Oh, absolutely. And if you consider that 10 of the last 14 homes sprinkled anyway, I think it might be a useful adjunct to, as well as communication, to just encourage the introduction of sprinklers. And again, I do point you to the study. It's worth having a look at the impact of the studies from Canadian Mortgage Housing and the National Research Council.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Martin. Anybody else on the committee on this one, or anyone? Jim, you want to go ahead, please?
It sounds like a bit of a sad day, but I guess we can't fight City Hall. I certainly wouldn't spend a lot of money on something that should be done without even a short discussion. But
yeah, there is, Jim. There is also the possibility I mean, the committee that they had, and you know about this, the committee they had recommended 3 possible approaches, but the committee's recommendation was for a 3-tiered system. And my sense from Tracy was that she hoped that that recommendation would ultimately become the practice in BC, in which case what you're saying would be the case. We could simply opt for one of the tiers.
But I mean, it's a sad day too, when they just say, well, we got to keep, you know, the real estate division people want the lowest price. As I say, they'll spend the money on grass sprinklers before they'll spend it on house sprinklers. And they are obviously have more say in the government than the real world.
I think you're correct. I think they were quite, and when I read what I did of the committee work, they were very clearly represented and strongly represented. I was surprised, I must say, in one case, to see that the insurance industries, which I thought would be big fans, at that time weren't that convinced because they worried about water damage.
They've used that water damage excuse for years.
Yeah.
But your building's still standing.
Yeah.
Yes, you're here.
I've said enough. Thank you.
So thanks, Jim, on that. The other thing we're doing, because there are, you know, they're very minimal things, but you know, I always look at things, what's it going to cost you? And, you know, it sounds like it's going to be pretty significant, but we have, because we think it's useful, we have scheduled a meeting with the minister responsible, and we will just keep connecting where we can and see if there's anything. But clearly, when we looked at the makeup of the committee, you know, committees are like that. There's people that, and it's not a bad word, but they lobby, right? So depends where the lobby ends up. So are we okay to, I don't want to cut off discussion, but can we finish on that part? And then if I could just suggest here a couple possibilities. There's 2 pieces we may want to look at, Ian, and committee members in general. There was a talk at some point of getting a group together for a workshop, and there was a talk I from my vocabulary looked at as a shaping session. But regardless, does it make sense for us to gather back and to try and continue this conversation and to figure out where we can? We've got some information requests coming. We've had some questions answered tonight, and we could look, if we decide to do that, we can figure out working with Ian. You've got some questions. We can set up a grid. The Village of Belcarrican, here's a grid. Here's what we think we've answered. You can confirm that. And we can, in some cases, we think you absolutely gave us 3 questions, but there were 3 questions that were probably asked over time. So we can condense where we have, figure out what we do, and see where we move from here. But I guess on behalf of Bruce and I, as elected people, we see that there's some important decisions that council needs to make in the end. And we're absolutely 100% that your guidance, your support, and your recommendations would help us make some wiser decisions. So I'll move it back to people to comment whether they'd like to engage in that, and if so, what that would look like.
Well,
Jim, you've got your hand up. Did you want to?
Just one other thing. I'm not sure whether you want to put this topic on the table, but are we supposed to be talking about metering by any chance?
So
Water houses I'm referring to.
Yeah, so I think that
At a later date.
Yeah, well, here let me answer it in a couple ways. Lorna talked about our new employee, has a lot of experience with metering, shutting them down, picking them up because some of them were seasonal communities. Your current council has part of their strategic plan, has metering on that, Lorna, and I'm looking at you to confirm that piece. And I believe this committee had talked about that, but that I'm not 100% sure on. But if this committee, as part of a process, would like to offer comment, I think council would be very pleased to receive whatever that comment is.
Okay, if I may ask, if there happens to be any written reports from the past as to why we did want to connect or, pardon me, initiate metering or not do it, I'd like to have a copy.
Okay, sure, and I don't know but let's hand, like Lorna's putting down some things that we'll look to see if we can get, and if we don't have them, right, we'll get back to you. Does that sound all right, Lorna?
Absolutely.
Okay, and then Martin, I've got you, and I'm looking at other folks.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment on the metering, and let's say to outline the importance of it. The importance of data. I looked at the data a little more as to the trends in water consumption in the village. So I have 3 years of monthly readings, and it brings out a lot of information. And I just invite whoever, village staff or even Chris, to take a look at it. The trends are really a significant increase in water consumption during the summer months. So it's most likely due to irrigation and those type of issues, or like we know the population increases in the summer, so that's another factor in Belcarra, but it's also things like irrigation. So when you have a metering system, then you are able to deal with that a little more and have people pay directly for the water at the intake. Now, I invite anybody to take a look at that data, and the village can provide that. I mean, they provided it to us several years ago, and they can be provided to Chris, I'm sure.
Okay, well, that makes some good sense. And thank you for that, Martin. So I mean, I don't want to be pushing too hard, but I would like to encourage. Is what I've kind of very briefly outlined. And Ian, when I say about we would kind of set up that grid of questions that have been answered, and when I talked to Lauren about it, she said we might answer a question and then the committee might have a response back to our answer. So we're not looking to deflect or anything, but we would really welcome the opportunity if this committee, and what I don't know is if you do want to do that, how would you like to do it, right? Do we pick a time and could we connect? If there's an agreement to do it, would the best way we do a quick canvas? Is it during the day? Is it in the evening like this? Is it a couple meetings? And then can we look about scheduling in a way where it's comfortable for people? So do you want to do a show of hands? Would people like to meet again? And we can have, we're not looking to carry this on forever, but we would like to utilize all that knowledge that you have to provide us with some thoughts and some recommendations and help us work through these issues that are so important to the village.
Maybe if I could.
Yep, go ahead, Ian.
I think we hit a major issue with regard to the outline of this manual and the definition of what its scope is. Seemed to me quite dramatic difference between what Chris visualizes and what the water committee has discussed as components to this. So I don't know how you want to resolve that one. I appreciate the answers we've had tonight. I don't think we need to keep flogging away at the same issues. I think we need to focus on moving forward with the most important item on the Village of Belcarra's list, which is this SOP or operational manual, or whatever we call it, to get it right. It's something that Lorna needs. It's something that the village staff need.
Yep.
And it's something that the council needs to make sure that they agree that that's how they want their water system operated. And that's the function of this as far as we're concerned, I believe. So I don't know if that should be the central focus as we move forward, I believe. I don't know, Martin, do you agree or have any comments?
Yeah, well, there's, I mean, yeah, the operating manual, I mean, like we discussed it at the beginning, I would like, I believe it's really the operators and also which should indicate or identify what they need, and then have that overview and complemented by both council and Chris, of course, because they will only comment on what they know and will not on what they don't know. So, you know, I agree on the manual. There's another issue I'd like to bring out, which I believe would be of valuable. First of all, Chris, I'd like to applaud you on all the various memos and briefings that you've done in the last year, and especially with the previous council, which had its challenges. In the memos, what struck, I mean, the memos were well written and with clarity and with the proper caveats, if you want to outline the assumptions that you're making, and I believe you understand what I mean. There was some issue, a number of issues, or a number of facts that or assumptions that you were making, and I was kind of quite questioning why you were making them. So that's a discussion I'd like to have in some future meeting. And one of them, which I've discussed with Bruce and others, is, you know, we were surprised that that you were always working with the full capacity of a tank and not the usable volume. So, you know, like what happened? How come you weren't provided that information, or how come you didn't? You know, there's different stories behind that, but there's a whole pack of other information which I see that you're using in your calculations, which I'm somewhat surprised as to why you're making those assumptions when the information is available. So for future discussions, I'd like to maybe exchange and get your inputs on that. I believe it would be beneficial.
Okay, so I don't know if Lorna's doing it, but I'm keeping a tentative agenda if we want to meet again. So, oh, Jim, let's go to you. Go ahead, please.
Martin's comments, I mean, I guess one of the things that I'm not completely sure is what is the line of authority for the people to do operate the water system as to who makes judgments of what they do, modify or adjust?
So let's let Lorna walk that through so everybody's understanding of what they are. Please.
I don't really understand the question. I mean, the water operators.
Just say we talk about this valve that's non-operational at the moment on the system. Who says whether we should ignore it, fix it, or adjust it?
Well, I think we should talk about that and bring it back to the committee.
Okay, no, I'm just wondering who has the authority to do that, to say whether it's going to be done. I mean, it certainly is not coming to the committee, and I wouldn't suspect it would. But I mean, presumably it would come to somebody that knows how to make the decision. I mean, maybe it has to go to Chris or another engineer on the system that says, yeah, we should fix that or we should not do it. But I mean, what is happening today? I'm not sure.
Well, now I would find out about it. I have a different superintendent now who does report to me, and we do discuss things like that, which I could say did not happen with the previous superintendent. So now I would know about it.
Yeah, and let me add to that answer a bit, and not to take away from what you're saying, Lorna, but Jim, the piece about the operators, and Lorna's just said they report to an exempt person, right? Who then reports to Lorna. And then the piece about would Lorna and that person seek to involve Chris? Or is there a recommendation that is such that Lorna would say, we need to put this to council to make a recommendation because it becomes a policy issue rather than a day-to-day operating, right? So, but I think those are the pieces, like this committee at some point could make a recommendation if they wanted, or a recommendation about what we should be looking at doing, right? So,
Sorry,
go ahead, Jim.
thank you.
Oh, okay. So here's the other piece. Like, Ian, you've looked to kind of condense this thing. The piece on all the questions, right? For me would be simply, we've got a record of the questions of where we're at. And I'm just speaking personally because I've kind of talked with Bruce, but I haven't talked with him a lot. My hope would be that we would capture all those questions, the totality, but we may, as a group, choose not to address all of them. We may say some of them are given wherever we are today, we're just going to put to the side, right? And what are the key 6 or 7, 8 or 9, or 4 or 5 items does the committee and us think that we should address if we're going to have a one-time meeting or a couple meetings together? What are the ones that we think will move us to the next stage as a group and as a community? So that's my thinking. Bruce, you're welcome to add on any committee members, but I think there's not only a utility, but a benefit from us all meeting again. And we tried to say coming in, we don't have a lot of answers, but we tried to come in with some answers, put them out there, knowing that one of them for sure was going to capture some attention, right? You know, so.
If I can just comment on that, Jamie.
Yep.
I mean, as I said at the beginning, this committee is dealing with a series of issues that have been identified by the council as high priority and ones that it wishes to advance on. In some cases, we're having to wait for information, the classic being what we can learn from the District of North Vancouver. But personally, I think continuing to have periodic meetings as we have additional information would be very productive. I found this a very productive session. I'm hoping the committee members did, but I don't think we have to have everything wrapped up before it's brought to council. If we have a recommendation we think council can move on, I'm sure council would be eager to hear the recommendation and then make a decision. So hopefully it'll have to do with the District of North Vancouver, but personally, I don't see a rush to wrap things up because we don't have all the information that you need to make your final recommendations, in my opinion. But I stand by to hear from Ian.
Okay, well, I think I'd like to discuss it. I have a lot of comfort that we can move forward, but I don't think we need to go with the full 6 issues. You are aware of all of the 6 issues. You've given us answers to, I think, 3 of them. So that's positive. And
yeah.
So my feeling is that, you know, we're progressing. The decision that's been made basically for us by the provincial government on sprinklers is that we can't afford to have them run the meter while they play around with whatever we provide. So we have to sit and wait for them to come up with whatever. I agree with that one.
Yep.
But I think the outstanding one, as I said, is this manual and the outline and the discussion on the scope of what the vision for this manual is. I think the water committee has a different view of it than what Chris is developing right now.
Yeah.
And it's not to say his is wrong. I think it's the first time we've seen what he's shown as going into the manual. So fair enough. And maybe as it further developed would understand how it fits together. I mean, don't want to argue about the semantics of what the thing is called, but we know what we want, what information we need to have in there that's signed off by the council as being the way they want the water system operated.
Yeah. You know, and Chris, you may want to jump in, but I just want to say in terms of, you heard it tonight from Chris, this conversation with the committee has been useful because him bringing that table of content, I think he's been very open that there's some pieces he hadn't looked at. I think Martin talked about, here's some pieces that are here, and they may not all need to go in right away. So, and Chris, I think away from this, when we were talking previously, talked about the importance of involving the people that do the system, you know, and we've got a natural piece. We've got a current person and we've got someone coming on board. So I was quite taken, and I don't want to misrepresent it, Martin, but your thought that maybe we could do some of it and then also maybe do some going down the road. So Ian, do you want to try and pick one or two items and come back and let Lorna work with the committee to find a good time and maybe look at that one and figure out, and we'll also, like, it'd be helpful, like when I talk about the 6 or 7, I'm not talking about that full scheme of all the ones, but what would be the 1, 2, 3, or 4 that you folks think we should look at together, right? And come to some outcomes. You want to do that, Jim?
Well, I was going to touch on something else, but
Sure.
If Chris has some ideas, I mean, his list of recommendations, how the document we've done today, we should try and get some of that stuff ahead of our meetings, if we, and because then we can get fed with it. And second other question I was going to ask, the page that Chris answered a bunch of questions on it. Could you send me a copy of that? I
didn't get it.
It wasn't on the screen. It was on the screen, but I mean, I was just reading it.
Yeah.
Sure.
I would think I'd be encouraged the people to get some documentation out before these meetings, not wait till each time we have a meeting and then get a bunch of documentations, discuss it. We can work on it in between. We're working on this thing any day we receive stuff.
Yeah, well, we're certainly not opposed to that, but I mean, we're trying to compile a lot of stuff that hadn't been answered and figure out where we're doing. But in terms of going forward, I think you got the nod from Lorna, some things that came out today in this meeting, we'll get to people. And, you know, if we want to have Chris put out some things around that maintenance, and if conversely, Martin, if you wanted to give us some thoughts ahead of time, or anybody on the committee, we're open to that too, right? You know, in terms of not only content, and Jim, you talked about quality assurance and things, but not only content, but also timing. Like, do we need to do everything in one fell swoop, right?
Yeah.
Chris?
I mean,
sorry, Jim, are you still up? Go ahead, Jim.
I mean, our chairman is very good at just getting information out to us all. So let's keep him on the top of the list.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we intend to work with the chair. Yeah. And thanks for,
This is kind of just going back to the manuals to some degree, whatever we want to call it.
Yes.
I can't help myself, but I like put my stick in the hornet's nest sometimes. There's evidently, how do I best put it? You guys have some concerns about certain bits and pieces. And maybe this is the wrong environment to ask it, but what in particular is it that you guys are really concerned with? Is it that you don't feel like operations are maintaining the system correctly? Is it something else, or are you just worried that you just don't know, so you're just asking all of these questions?
Yeah, I can answer. I think we don't know what records are kept, who does it, who authorizes decisions. Those are the things that are outstanding in our minds. Not to say that we don't agree with what's happening, because the potable water is not the issue in our mind. It's the decisions, for instance, in those critical valves. There's also the setting of the low water. How did that come about? We don't have an answer on that. We have no records to document why that decision was made.
Yeah, so
and that's where we need to understand all this stuff. I don't know, and I think somewhere in this overall equation, council should be aware that these were done. We've got a valve setting done for low water that our council representative was not aware of. And that shouldn't happen.
Yeah, so that was the main issue from a fire protection issue, that the valve settings were not to the understanding of Bruce, who had written several articles on that several years ago, and the information that had been provided to the committee also. So it was understood that after the Turtlehead and Sinclair fire, that the settings had been raised to a certain level, and that the current operating systems were an improvement to what occurred prior to the Turtlehead fire, when in fact we just recently found out that that was not the case. And so village staff were not following that, those instructions, or it wasn't really instructions. So maybe Bruce can comment on that, because he lived through the issue between 2017 and 2018. So it was surprising to everyone.
Okay, I understand what you guys are driving at now. I'm more of a looking forward type of character than looking back. And I think what you guys are really looking for is saying, hey, we want this document to be the gospel on on how this thing is driven, right? Like how the set points are put within the reservoir. And this is the document you want to refer people back to and be like, we all agreed this is where these set points live and they belong, and you shall not change them. And an engineer signs them off, whatever it is, or there's a discussion around it. So that's kind of one of the things I'm driving at, because you want to use this document as the we all agree to this, and this is what we're going to do in the future, and not have someone change the set points.
Chris, the one thing I would suggest, I think Martin is correct. There were a number of assumptions that a past council made after the shock, frankly, of the Turtlehead fires, where we had more water than we would ever have had without a domestic system. And we all know, everybody here certainly knows, that our system was designed to an absolute minimum basis, primarily over cost concerns and capacity of this community. But we did make a number of changes after that, and it's not so much that I would want a fixed set of measures. I appreciate, I think, as you obviously do, that we have professionals managing the system, well-trained in terms of potable water, and the committee has praised their work, as indeed their annual reports make clear they should be, for meeting those standards that they were trained for. But when it comes to making changes in the system, I simply want to know that a responsible person has made the decision, what they've based it upon, and I think we should know about it. And I'll just cite a couple of examples. The most shocking for me was to discover that we returned to the lower setting after I had merely informed anyone who ever asked, several who didn't, that we now had a higher minimum, which was ensuring that we had a guarantee of more water, at the minimum amount of water we would have in case of fire. During the actual Turtlehead fire, I was embarrassed to learn that the storage tank that we have here at Dutchman's Creek, which is similar to the Tatlow tank, it was, in my mind, it was full of water and could be used to shuttle water to the fire when we got low. It's not connected to our system. I found out after the fire that there was no capacity to drain from that system. And in fact, the truck had been shuttling from Crystal Creek. So, this is the kind of thing that happens when you have a problem like that, right? You discover everything that could go wrong has gone. So that was the second. And so my understanding is that we have now methodically pumped water. We've inspected the tank. We've ensured it's suitable. We've pumped water into the Dutchman's Creek tank, and it's periodically tested. But again, if I told someone that, I don't have an absolute assurance that's the case. I don't know if that's written into a manual somewhere. I don't know if I can see a list of, that it's been checked every 3 months or 6 months and someone's put their initials on it. I would like that to be the case. And then a third one was the recognition that given the response time we have, let's say, the fire chief tells me it's in the neighborhood of 15 minutes from when they get a call till they're fighting the fire. They have the hoses on and they're fighting. Because we had introduced remote control of the tank for our staff, we had suggested well, listen, when a call comes in, staff should just trigger inflow from the District of North Vancouver. So unlike the Turtle Head fire, the thing doesn't just continue to decline until it happens to reach its set point, which I believe is about 63% before it just starts to refill. We could have had 15 more minutes of inflow, and my expectation would be that we do have. But again, I don't know how that's operationalized. We talked about it. We said it could be done, but do our two staff, now one staff, does he in fact trigger it every time there's a farm in Balcarron? I just don't know. So again, I'm not asking that people that aren't trained appropriately make those decisions, just that we be aware of how those decisions are implemented, and if they're impractical, explain to us why they're impractical. I mean, we're certainly open to that. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I think I have a clear understanding where you guys are driving this ship now, for sure, compared to where I was going. Yeah.
Thanks, Bruce, Chris, and weaving back to Jim, and then maybe we can look if people are good. I don't want to cut anybody off, but if we're good to kind of move to next step. Jim?
I
Please.
hate to keep harping on this quality control manual, but what the stuff Bruce is just talking about is part of the quality control manual, and anybody can go and view how to operate. That's the key. It's there ready to go until somebody properly modifies it. It's just that simple. And you can look at what the to-do, and you can look at what the results have been over the past weeks, months, or years.
Mhm.
And if you get into a business like I was in, where we're also dealing with the military and so forth, they are super strict on these kind of things. So I just say it's much simpler at the level we're working here.
Right.
It has to be very. That's all.
Okay, thanks, Jim. So I'm conscious, maybe with optimism. I think we set this meeting till 6:30, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So I've heard some different things. Do we want to, if we want to schedule a meeting, we'll certainly we absolutely want to work through Ian, and we know he's doing a good job. And Ian can advise us if on material beforehand goes through him and he ferries it out to people, or we send it directly. We're fine either way. Jim, I think your point is going forward, let's get some things ahead of time, and that's helpful. And Chris's point about we're moving forward from here is my point and Bruce's. But if we were to look to get people together, is this time slot like roughly okay? Or does it make sense to try and do a little later and go a little later in the evening? Or is there the capacity to go during the day?
This time slot's good with me. I can do it in the daytime as well.
Okay.
But this time slot's fine.
Okay, so let me just go around with people, not to put pressure on, but Martin, where would you be in terms of time slots generally?
Yeah, I would prefer earlier, something like it could be from 3 to 4, 3 to 5 type thing.
Okay. I'm going to note that down, and Lorna, you can grab that too. And so that would work for you too, I believe, Doug, because you said,
Yeah.
okay, Jim, how about you? I'm not going in any particular order.
3 to 5 is ideal. I mean, I'm retired. We'll meet with the people that have to work.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And Ian?
Yeah, same as Jim. I'm available.
Okay. And Chris, how are you for this time or 3 to 5 slot roughly?
I'm just jealous I'm not retired like the rest of you. Yeah, I mean, I just need some heads up.
Yeah, so if Lorna worked with you for some times, and Bruce, does that 3 to 5 work for you, or?
Yeah, that's fine. That's good.
Okay, so we will look to do some things and then get a tentative agenda out. Is it all right to go through you, Ian, kind of scope out a couple things? And then you can go to your committee if there's support stuff that we can try and get beforehand, and we'll work through Lorna, yourself, Bruce, and myself. Is that all right with people?
Yep.
Okay, Jim?
Yep.
Okay, good. So is it safe to say thank you to everybody? We really appreciate it.
Yep.
And it's been a good meeting, and we'll see you again once we've worked through those machinations, okay? Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thanks, then.
Yeah, thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Much appreciated.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep, thanks.
Thanks.
Turn this on, just turn it off. Exit out.
Yeah, we get to leave. There's a little button in the bottom, Jim, that says leave.
Oh,
You on red there?
oh,
So if you go away, sorry, if you leave, then I've been successful in tutoring, which will be a miracle. Down to the bottom right hand, Jim? Is that right, Paula?
I don't see that.
Okay, I'm gonna do my second learning strategy. Sherry, can you do leave for him?
I know how to do it.
Okay, nice to see you again, Sherry.
Good-o.
That's what we have
Okay.
times for.
Yeah, okay, good night, everybody. Night.